If you've ever canned green beans, you notice that sometimes they look, rather than bright green, kind of an army green. And so in today's video, I am testing the process of how we can perfect getting the greenest green beans with the least amount of work. Come along. Hey, welcome back to our homestead. Today I'm standing here snapping the green beans. It just dawned on me, why am I standing? Because always when growing up, we would sit down with a big bowl of green beans and we would sit and watch a movie or something. Well, all the kids and my mom, whoever was in the house, was snapping beans. So my kids have done that. We would listen to audiobooks or something when they were growing up, and here I am standing getting tired. I'm not really sure why, but it's not too bad. I'm at counter level. And I have done one pan and I've gotten this much, and I have a little bit more in this pan, and then I'm going to put them in a canner. So first things first, I've got to get finished with the snapping, and then we'll get hopping into the canner. Canning green beans is a pretty simple process, but I find that the prep work, like snapping the beans, seems to take the longest. This is a super unusual year for me in that it's September, first part of September, and this is the first time I am breaking out my canner. It's crazy. Our garden has been stingy and it's just been like that. So I got this stove, this vintage stove with 6 burners, thinking about canning, and it'll be great for that. It's gas. I also have a double camp stove out on the back porch, which I plan to use for like heavy canning, but I'm not going to be doing heavy canning today. I think probably about 2 loads in the canner will be enough for my green beans. So I am going to take this shelf down because it's nice for lots of things, but it's going to be in the way for canning. I love these old stoves where they had these interesting things that they added, like this shelf. Okay, now we have lots more room for my big canner. So I've got water boiling, almost boiling. I'm gonna get the canner going. And I'm going to be using a method that I learned from Ruth Zimmerman that keeps your green beans really green. Usually they get kind of that army green looking color, but this, if you just do it this way, it keeps them bright green. It's much more attractive sitting on your shelf. Gonna give my jars a good scrub here. I recently got this really long handled scrubber and I like it really well for jars. I'm just giving the jars a good washing with soap and water, and I'm not sterilizing them beforehand. They will be sterilized as they are processing in the high pressure. Okay, canning green beans isn't really that hard. It's just I think getting everything out is the hardest part. And then it's just a matter of doing things. So I'm going to put a teaspoon of salt into each jar. It's recommended that you use canning salt because then it will not cloud up your jars. I like Himalayan salt anyway, so that's what I'm using. And then you just pack in your beans. I use the raw pack method. It's just always seemed really simple. And so I just pack in my beans to the jars as much as I can. And that just means filling up the jar with beans. You can do them whole or you can do them broken. I just find it easy enough to do them broken. One of these times I think I'm going to try the pints and leave them whole. They're very pretty. So you want to leave it 1-inch head space. So you pack them in, and when you add the water, it's going to adjust your beans a little bit. This is actually kind of hilarious, and I did not realize until I was editing this video that when I went to move my pot of water, I actually set my pot holder on fire, and I didn't even realize it till now. The trick that's kind of fun that I do to keep them green is to add a capsule of zinc or a tablet of zinc to each one. Now these are 50 milligrams, you don't need that much, so I'm just going to break it in half and just throw it in there when you put your beans in. And for some reason that causes your beans to maintain their greenness. Be sure to watch later in the video where I make some corrections on the amount of zinc and compare what they look like with different concentrations. And I didn't think that it altered the taste. I wondered if it would, but it didn't seem to. I am just going to use a long spatula. It works just fine. You just run it along the side of your jar to get out any bubbles, to make sure that bubbles pop. And then you want an inch of headspace, and I've got a little bit too much in this one, so I'm going to relieve that of a little bit of the water just so that I don't have it overfilled. And then all I have to do is get my lid out, place it on, and put my rings on. I just so happen to have had my favorite little canning tool is that little magnet that grabs the lids out of the boiling water. I like that tool a lot, but mine seems to have the magnet detached, so just doing it by hand. So just put your jar rings on and put them in your processor. Rinse and repeat. Once you have your jars filled up, you can put them straight in the pressure canner. You want them fingertip tight. And then you're gonna, like in my area, I'm gonna process these for 25 minutes at 11 pounds of pressure. So after I put my lid on, once you finally get your lid on, I had to do some fiddling with mine. It had been sitting in storage, and so I had to take out the gasket and grease it up, and then I actually worked the grease into it and bent it and worked it around. It's not an old gasket, so I'm not sure. It was just having an issue today. So once I got that on, now it goes freely. So once you have it back on the stove after all that fiddling around, you're going to want to let this belch out the steam for 10 minutes. And once it gets a nice steady stream of steam, 10 minutes, and then you put your weight on your rocker. So while this is doing this, I'm going to be filling my next jars except for the water, and then I actually have to go up the hill, turn on our solar well pump so that we can have more water, because I've been noticing that the pressure has been going down as I've been washing things. So always something to consider when you're living off grid. Once you've vented it for 10 minutes, put that rocker on and let it rock. Watch your time and let it get up to 11 pounds of pressure, and then adjust your stove so that it keeps it there for the next 25 minutes. When your time is up, let the pressure come down naturally and wait until you have no pressure coming out at all to remove your rocker. Give the pan a rest for another couple minutes and then open it and see what you've got. If you notice me giving these jars a funny look, it's because I didn't put enough zinc into these jars and they didn't get quite as bright green as they should have been. So we're continuing this experiment with a few more jars in a minute. So I added another half a tab to the remaining jars, and I'm putting them in the canner, and we're going to see what those look like. We're back again today, canning a few more green beans. I don't have a lot, just a few, but I did want to make sure I get this experiment done right, because the last green beans that I canned, I did add the zinc, and I added between 25 and 50 milligrams of zinc. And after the results were only a little bit more green, I decided to look up my original source, and I found out that the person who I originally found this out from was adding 100 milligrams of zinc per quart. So for me, that's 2 tablets, putting them down in the bottom of my jars, and that will help the beans to stay nice and green. And I will show you the jars that we've been putting on our shelves, the ones that I use with the zinc, and the ones that have like 50 milligrams kind of have 50% more greenness. And then the 25%, it's really hard to tell that you did anything at all. So always learning, always something new to brush up on. And I still am glad that I learned the zinc trick, because it does make them more attractive. Now comes the interesting time. It's time to tell the truth, as they say. Let's look at these beans behind me, and as you can see, I have a gradient of greenness in my beans, and I think we may be surprised at what we find as to how much zinc produced what results. Let's take a closer look. Of course, my beans from last year are more dusty, and so we can tell those a lot easier. So this is some of last year or the year before's crops, and I tend to mix my beans. I mix yellow and greens just so that we have a variety of flavor, and it kind of balances it out. So of course it wouldn't be fair to compare those that have yellow in them, because it's going to automatically make them look brighter. So all these from this portion on are from previous years. The Roma beans tend to can up more brightly, the more like the Kentucky Wonder or the I don't know, Blah Healed. These actually started out purple and they are now looking green. But so this is the general color of the green beans, and I will say that I'm kind of impressed with the Italian Roma type beans, because they stay much brighter than the other kind. Okay, so that's just a note to self. Starting over here is 2024, what I've canned, and I haven't canned that many, and you can already tell that I'm having quite a bit more brightness. Well, down here, starting with this jar, this, and up to here are the ones that I put 25 milligrams of zinc. So if you can compare them to the ones beside it, there's not a really discernible difference in greenness, and of course that's going to also be determined by variety of beans, because some beans are just going to be more less bright. These are what a typical bean would look like in my pantry. So compare that to this, it's pretty similar, maybe slightly more green. Then as we move down here, starting right here, we have 50 milligrams, and that is all the way up to here actually. Those are all 50 milligrams of zinc in a quart and 25 milligrams in this one. So they are much more bright. You can tell the color is much more cheerful and bright and probably more appetizing. And then my last little tiny batch only had 3 jars in it, basically 2.5. And so these are my 100 milligrams. This one, and this one. And of course, this one, actually, I don't remember. I think that for this pint, I had the beans in a quart first, and then I just wasn't going to fill it up, so I dumped it in the pint. And so some of, this probably has more than 50 milligrams. It's between 50 and 100. And so it does have a little bit more brightness. But if you compare it to if you compare it to the 50, there's really no discernible difference. And so from my own experimentation, this has 100, this has 50. There's not a big difference. So I definitely would just probably do 50. 25 milligrams just doesn't quite seem to cut it. And if you don't put any at all, it really doesn't matter. Green beans still taste the same. They still taste good. I don't notice when I eat these, with the ones that have the zinc in them, I don't notice any particularly improved flavor. It's just the color from what I can tell. So I'd love to know if you have found anything different. If you've played around with how much zinc you put in, or if you're just kind of adding the straight 100, it's not going to hurt anything to add the straight 100, and it'll probably do a little bit to boost your immune system because zinc is so good for your immune system. So I just thought I would share those results because I found it super interesting. Now I have to ask you, is that the results that you were expecting? Did you expect that twice the amount of zinc would not really have a huge difference? I guess that there's a threshold to which it has an effect. And if you just want to be, better safe than sorry, add 100. Like I said, it's not going to hurt anything. You just want to be more frugal and you just want to do half. I really think that you'll be fine with just having 50 milligrams in a jar. So I hope you've learned something. I certainly did. I hope you're canning everything you want to can and keeping up with the garden. Here at Ridgehaven Homestead, we're always learning. It's usually by trial and error, and most often error, but we'll share with you what we learn so that you can have less waste, less failures. Let us do the failures and we'll tell you what to do. And I hope you stick around. Be sure to subscribe so you can keep getting our videos, and thanks for watching.